What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 33 of the Strength House podcast. Tonight, we are live with Brittany Diamond, pro strong woman, who will break down some of the events, some quick tips you can use for some of the more common events, and what has helped her become one of the strongest women in the world. Stay tuned.
The Strength House podcast, featuring Greg Robbins and Tony Bonvecchio.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Strength House podcast. This is episode 33, and I am here alongside Tony Bonvecchio as always, and we have the very strong, very awesome Brittany Diamond on the show tonight as well. How are you doing, Brittany?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Thanks for coming on the show, especially late at night and working with us to push it back a little bit. Okay, cool. So first, well, I guess kind of the second strongman competitor, but Pat was more, I'd say, more amateur. So definitely our first pro strongman competitor on the show, and a strong woman and not a strong man necessarily.
I'm going to mess that up a couple times. Well, Brittany, as you know, we have a tradition on this podcast. We are half strength and conditioning, half craft beer review. So we're going to crack into a couple beers here given to us just today, just a couple hours ago, from Michelle Elwell, our good friend, Strength House member, and fellow Vermonter, hooked us up. Our first beer of the night, we've got Lush Double IPA from Frost Beer Works in Hinesburg, Vermont. This is a good one. They just started canning it.
Yeah. I think I've had this once before in a bottle.
Yep.
Don't really remember it, but I remember it being good, I guess. I don't remember why.
So, Brittany, as we crack into this first beer, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, how you got into strength training, and what's on your plate as far as training right now?
Absolutely. So first off, I do apologize. It's a little bit loud. I'm actually hanging out. I'm in a gym right now. I'm hanging out in the kids' room. So you might hear some barbells dropping, but that's okay. So I've been an athlete my entire life. My first sport was actually cross country. And believe it or not, I actually still do enjoy long distance running. So I started off when I was about 8, just running. On Saturday mornings, I used to get up really early and put on the infomercials where they had people exercising. And I was always fascinated with just trying to beat my number of push-ups every Saturday. So from a young age, I was pretty active. Went on my main sports in high school. It was track. I did long jump and kind of middle distance, sprinting as well. And then I actually had a hamstring injury, and I come from a very Italian family that doesn't really believe in loans or anything like that. So my dad was basically like, well, if you don't get a scholarship, I'm not co-signing a loan for you. And I knew I wanted to go away to school. And so I started doing some research, and I found out that a lot of Division I rowing programs take on novice athletes if, number one, they're willing to wake up at 4 a.m. every day while they're in college. And number 2, if they're just kind of naturally athletic, about 5'7" and up, and just strong. So I contacted the rowing coaches, walked on my novice year, and that's kind of when I fell in love with the weight room. My coach he was a graduate of Springfield College. His name was Jay Azalea. And I just fell in love with, when I was in a boat rowing, I was with 6 other people. Now, sometimes we would win a race, sometimes we lose, but I never knew, 100% of the outcome wasn't based on me. And when I was in the weight room, whether I could lift a weight or not, I just fell in love with how that was 100% on me. It kind of reminded me of my days in track. So kind of how I started. Then I found strongman when I was a junior in college. And I told myself once I graduated and done with rowing, that was it. I was going to go to strongwoman full time, and that's exactly what I did 3 years later.
Awesome.
Yeah, pretty well-rounded athletic background.
Yeah.
We talked a couple weeks ago with Steve Tripp of Top Strength, where you'll be training on a regular basis soon, about how important it is to be well-rounded. So it sounds like it's served you well to have kind of a broad athletic background leading you to being a professional strong woman.
Absolutely.
Brittany, are there any lessons that you could take from track or from rowing that, even though those were, or rowing at least was more team oriented, that have helped you in your lifting career?
Absolutely, and I always pass this along to my athletes too. You have to practice being uncomfortable. And rowing and track are sports that when you're doing them, the lactic acid buildup happens almost instantly, and you just kind of have to learn to, get through that threshold. I feel like pain is something that the more you practice pushing through, the higher that threshold is going to become. So oftentimes people don't think lifting weights is painful, but in strongman, sometimes there's a max distance carry, and I always compare that. I'm like, this feels like rowing. Like my lactic acid in my legs is instantly there, and it's just a mental game, like telling myself I gotta keep pushing, and you definitely have to practice that.
Yeah, rowing is like all out as fast as you can for what, like 7 to 10 minutes straight. Like that's what a race will typically take.
Yes, it's 7 minutes of hell.
Yeah.
It's 2,000 meters, so yeah, good times around that 7-minute mark. So
yeah. When I worked at Brown University, I worked a little bit with the women's rowing team, one of the best teams in the country, and just watching them train like down at the boathouse and then watching them out on the water, absolutely insane what rowers put themselves through.
It is. That definitely served me well.
And that's what's always impressed me about strongman as far as all the strength sports goes. It seems to be really well balanced. Like it requires that huge conditioning component, endurance component, as well as a lot of things of maximal strength. So I wonder, what is your training like when you're not training like the events? What does your training look like right now when you're in the weight room if you're not practicing the actual events?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I am on a contest prep, of course, it's kind of event specific, but let's talk about, a few weeks, maybe 8, 12 weeks out. I do a lot of movements that will simulate events, which is a lot of the, the big 3 plus overhead press. So squat, bench, deadlift, etc. But on top of that, I kind of joke when I was actually talking to Steve Tripp recently about how I like to program, how my coach programs me, and kind of where I found the balance. So I have a combination of strongman, powerlifting, and actually bodybuilding. A lot of my accessory work, I'll be doing 3, 4, 5 different exercises of 15 to 20 reps. And people are always like, well, isn't that pointless? And I say, no, because number one, for example, let's say my triceps, those are one of the weakest parts of my body. When I'm doing a log overhead, the last 2 inches, if I don't get under it enough to jerk it, it's all triceps. Plus, doing the accessory work helps facilitate recovery. And one thing that I think a lot of people in my sport neglect, which has helped me a lot, is the conditioning aspect. I do conditioning. I try and make it a habit to do it 3 out of the 4 days I lift, plus 2 extra days of more steady state. Everybody hates that, cardio word. They call it conditioning now, but it's the same thing. So
Yeah.
That's true. That's good advice. Yeah,
I get pretty good at skipping cardio these days.
I'm great at it. Yeah. Well, yeah, things that shouldn't be cardio, I just call them cardio because they're just hard at this point. So one thing that's always interested me, I like asking different people that compete in strongman is, as someone that's done more powerlifting, I struggle with like overhead pressing quite a bit, and I know overhead press is a huge component to the strongman events. What are some of the things that have really helped you with your overhead press?
Practice. That's actually my weakest event, and I believe it's because, for so many years I was on a horizontal plane rowing, and until I did strongman, I never pressed anything over my head. So that's something that you can practice. I do a lot of volume with it, so I usually do it twice a week. Unlike the deadlift, where your CNS is kind of going to be fried if you do a heavy session. I like to do 1 heavy overhead session and then 1 more, that's light but a lot of volume. So I do a lot of literally just picking things up and putting them over my head.
Okay. And do you frequently use just like a regular standard barbell as opposed to a log?
I use a little bit of both. So if I can get my hands in a log, that's definitely a little bit better because the hand placement's different. It's actually a lot more lax than you'd expect compared to a barbell. So I do try and use the log or an axle, which is the thicker bar. Sometimes if I'm traveling, I'll just use a barbell. That's one thing I've learned over the years of competing is to not get so hung up on the details, because there's so many people I notice when I coach beginners, they kind of have this mindset like, well, if I can't do it perfectly, I might as well not do it at all. And I say, no, think the opposite. Whatever you can do, you need to do, because it's the consistency. It's days in and days out of the training of doing, whether it's a barbell or a log, putting it overhead. If you're practicing it, you're getting better.
Yeah. Make the best of what you got.
Yeah. That's great advice, especially nowadays. Strength training is becoming more and more trendy. So you got more equipment companies, you got more equipment, you have more, if I don't have the squat shoes that match my, t-shirt, then I'm not going to be ready to train sort of population coming into it. So it's always good to hear from really strong people that, it doesn't matter what equipment you're training on in the long run. It's really how hard you work.
Exactly.
And when you get ready for an event, I know you're prepping for a competition right now, do you know what the events are going to be pretty well ahead of time?
It depends on the competition. That's why I like strongman so much. Sometimes there's a mystery event. Sometimes what some of the events are, and some of them you don't. Oftentimes too in strongman, even if they tell you what the events are, 9 times out of 10 the events probably will change that day. Just due to a number of different factors. Sometimes it's hard to, for example, car deadlift. Sometimes they say it's going to be, a big car, then maybe we end up with a Prius. Or maybe all of a sudden they can't get a car in the convention center, so we're deadlifting 1 million tires. So you have to be prepared for anything.
That goes right back to what you said before, is your training doesn't necessarily have to be perfect, but it has to be consistent. You have to be adaptable, and if you just keep training, you're probably gonna be ready for anything.
Yeah. Brittany, so one other question I have before we get to some questions that people sent in, was, I know, way back when I was a coach at Total Performance Sports, I always enjoyed, I enjoyed the strongman Saturday training things where I got to hear Eric and other people teach the different events. And I didn't realize until later on, years later, how much that helped me coach, because there's certain strongman events that have become more popularized, where we use them in strength and conditioning, and we use them with powerlifters. So I always like to hear what are some tips on some of those lifts that you have for people that do those. So a lot of people do farmers carries. What's a pro? Do you have any kind of pro tips or pro tricks that kind of can help somebody be better at doing the farmer's carry right away?
Yeah, so for a farmer's carry, I often see people do simple things like not grip the implement right in the middle. So that's automatically kind of throwing you off balance. Or another common mistake is they pick it up and they look down. So one thing I always say is, look straight ahead and pick a focus point. Much like if you squat, you want to have your eyes forward and concentrating on something so that you're looking forward and staying upright, just helping you be in that upright chest up position naturally. So little tips like that. I try not to overcomplicate it with beginners too much, because if you give someone too many cues, they don't really know where to start. So I always try and think of safety first, which is not dropping the implement on your toes, and little things like that.
Okay, that's a good point. That a lot of strongman implements have made their way into strength and conditioning, even for team sport athletes. So you do a ton of carries, whether it's farmer's walks, carries on the chest with a med ball or a sandbag or something like that, offset carries. We think of the squat, bench, and deadlift, it's so technical. You can really dig down deep into those. I couldn't really dig into the nitty gritty of how to do a farmer's carry, or how to do pick up an Atlas stone. I don't know the nuts and bolts of that, but I'm sure those you can make them just as complex as the classic power lifts if you wanted to.
You can, but then that's also the beauty of strongman, is you might watch, several of the strongest people in the world press a dumbbell, and they might do it several different ways. There's no right way. You kind of have to learn your own body mechanics, and the best coach will tell you oftentimes to kind of watch different videos, watch different techniques, and just kind of do what's natural, because there's so many different ways.
What's your favorite of all the strongman events?
Oh God, that's hard. I feel like I have a love-hate relationship with all of them, but one of my favorites is probably Atlas stones. I like them because I feel like it's very like old school. When you think of strongman on TV from back in the day, you kind of think of them lifting up these huge stones. I like those because, you know, it's messy, it's gross, get tacky all over you, but it's also really taxing, and it's much more athletic than people realize. You're kind of doing all different movements. You're picking something up off the floor, and then you're triple extending it up, and sometimes you even have to, for my next competition, it's like 62 inches, which almost turns into like an overhead press for me getting it up. So I guess stones is one of my favorites.
Nice. So the stone, like Atlas stones, have always intrigued me because when you look at it and people like bend over and get into that position, you can kind of get into what looks to the naked eye like a pretty sketchy position.
Yes.
So what do you say to somebody who sees you pick up an Atlas stone and they're like, "What the fuck? You're gonna snap in half." What do you?
You're gonna break your back.
Yeah. What do you tell them?
And actually when I'm coaching that particular lift, I always tell people, I'm like, don't really think of a deadlift because you want to tighten your lats, and then when you're picking it up, your ass is kind of actually in the air, which goes against, you know, everything we've learned. But it's teaching people kind of how to load the hamstrings properly and how to grip it so that, you know, the weight is also in your lats when you're squeezing that Atlas stone trying to pick it up, and you're sitting with it. So a lot of times I tell people, you know, don't worry, I'm not gonna break my back. I know how to, you know, load my hamstrings and things like that. And breaking that form down is definitely one of the harder things to teach because, like I said earlier, it goes against kind of everything you've learned.
So if you've got a lifter who doesn't have access to stones, let's say on like a regular basis, what kind of accessory exercises would you use to build up that event lift when they can't train it directly?
So front squats are actually a lot similar. Of course, you're not picking something up off the ground, but if you do like front squats from like a pin press, so you're actually stopping and have to pick it up, that's similar because it's so quad dominant, but also the core strength and as well as, you know, upper back. You have to keep yourself upright and stabilized, helps a lot. But then I'll even do simple things like if they have access to a medicine ball, picking up that or picking up really any kind of odd object off the floor. But front squats, you know, are definitely probably the number one thing that kind of stimulate the muscles, but you also want to get the simulation of the actual event, so picking something up off the ground.
Front squats do suck.
They do suck.
But we've always kind of heralded them as like a pretty good deadlift accessory exercise. So it sounds like we're on the same page.
Yeah. We use them a lot as, you know, an accessory for deadlifting. So in the sense of strongman accessory to the Atlas stone, and obviously there's a lot of deadlifting that goes on in strongman too. So the front squat is a lot. How often do you compete? I know it seems like it's kind of infrequently, but how often does like a squat show up in a strongman competition?
So I've personally never had one. I know more of like the higher level male pros have had some really odd, like it's never a barbell and weights. You know, usually they'll have like two huge tires or something to add an extra component to it to make it, number one, pleasing to the crowd to watch, but number two, even a little bit harder, like something that's going to bounce around and make your core, to force you to stabilize more. So I've unfortunately never had one. I hope I do because I really like when they do kind of non-conventional lifts, and plus I love squatting, so that'd be cool if we could get one of those.
Yeah. So like with the squat not being that involved like in the competition, do a lot of strong like men and women train the squat pretty aggressively for the competition anyways?
So that's a great question, and I think it comes down to kind of personal preference. I know for me, what I like to do is use the camber bar or the SSB bar and kind of do more of like a box squat because, again, using that bar helps kind of keep my core, or not keep my core as stabilized as the barbell, which simulates, you know, something like a yoke. So I'll do something like that, and I would say, and I'm not speaking for everyone, but a lot of people tend to, as they get closer and closer to a competition, they might take the squat out a little bit because, again, it's going to interfere with some of your main events that you need to concentrate on. But I think most people probably use it as an accessory lift to some extent.
Okay, cool.
I guess it, like, you know, the deadlift probably has more application to a lot of strongman events, but like you said, you just can't train it quite as frequently. So if you're not going to deadlift, you know, multiple times a week, most people can get away with squatting, at least twice a week.
Cool. And that's where maybe the front squat could be very
Oh
valuable
yeah, absolutely.
tool.
Yeah, front squat should definitely be on every strongman's list, whether or not they have Atlas stones. I feel like it transfers over so well.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, we had a couple user-submitted questions on Instagram, some of them relating to specific events. Somebody asked about the yoke and like what you would do to improve upon that. So that seems to be a pretty popular event in a lot of strongman competitions. It's exciting to watch.
I want to get a yoke.
Yeah, that would be awesome if we got a yoke. We asked Steve where he got his. Like, what would you recommend to somebody who was like trying to improve their yoke carry? The obvious answer is, do more yoke carries, but what kind of like technique tips, what kind of accessory exercises would you use with that?
So for yoke, I always recommend, and this is how I was taught, if you want to improve your speed, which you do because it's strongman, need to be fast, you need to practice the yoke extremely light for 1,000,000 runs. So there are some days when, let's say I have a 600-pound yoke in my competition for 60 feet, I won't even get close to 600 pounds until I'm a few weeks out. I'll do runs at 200, 300, 400 pounds for like 15 to 20 sets, just working on my foot speed. Something else I recently started doing, actually this summer, which helped me a lot, was agility ladders, just once a week if I can. That has seemed to help my footwork speed a lot, because in the yoke, it's very technical since it usually comes down, between first and eighth place. There might be a fraction of a second, so your foot speed, takes priority. But also, I guess for accessory, the cambered bar squat's awesome. Plank with weight, having that strong core, strong trunk, definitely need it, or you can feel like you're going to crush yourself in half.
Yeah, because I guess it's probably not the legs that go first in a yoke carry, right? It's something like upper back positioning or core positioning.
Yeah, and it depends. I know for me, like when I was first starting out, I really kind of hurt my neck on it, just because, it's forcing, all the vertebrae in your body literally to compress. So a lot of times people get injured on it. I think it's more neck, spine, lower back. You definitely feel your legs, quads especially. But again, I think if you were going to feel anything go first, it'd probably be more back related, like you said.
Yeah, I can see that. I could see yoke carries having pretty good application to the power lifts as well, just because upper back strength and core strength is so important.
Yeah, I've always wanted a yoke. I just think it's badass to just put the thing on your back and just.
I
feel like your nose would explode immediately, and there'd
I'm
just be blood everywhere.
actually yoking tonight, so it's funny that you bring that up.
Would you suggest even the lighter speed carries for like a farmer's carry as well, or does it not have as much application there?
Yeah, absolutely. I apply the same methodology when I'm doing farmers or any type of carry. If you want to gain that speed with the heavy weight, you have to practice it multiple times with that, lighter weight. Because the goal is, I know for me, like when I train, I'll increase the weight slightly each week, but I always aim to get the same time I did the previous week. So I slowly increase the weight, maybe 5 to 15 pound increments.
Cool. All right.
All right, you ready for beer number 2?
Yes, we got to crack beer number 2 here. Beer number 2 is called Elaborate Metaphor. That's, yeah. It's an American Pale Ale coming in at 5.4% ABV from the good folks at Burlington Beer Company in Burlington, Vermont.
Yep. They're on that kind of like Pine Street tour. These guys always got really funky designs on the front, and this is our third Pale Ale in 2 episodes.
Yeah, the shows are coming a little more in the middle of the week. We've had to bring the ABVs down, so.
You mean that bottle of Affogato I got in my fridge? We shouldn't split that for an episode?
I'll do it.
Fuck it, let's go.
This thing looks pretty hazy, though, for a pale ale.
It does, yeah. They're I feel like, in a similar vein. They do a lot of, like, wacky stuff with, different beers that are the hops that are featured are very similar to what you'd see in a Trillium or a Treehouse, kind of the big 4 of like Galaxy, Mosaic, Citra, kind of all that stuff. So
yeah,
it does look good.
Let's test it out.
It smells really good. Yeah, I like that.
It is very good.
It's got kind of that like dry, like crackliness of a pale ale, and Sorry, Brittany, for our nonsensical beer talk, but this is my one chance to nerd out about it. We used to be very heavy on the beer talk, and it's kind of like we've weaned ourselves off of it. The more we've learned that like our listeners really like don't give a fuck about like all the technical beer stuff, but it's still fun for me. There was another question submitted on Instagram. I can't really remember exactly what it was, but something in the vein of like, how did you get into strongman? You kind of like answered that question already. So I'll spin the question a little bit and say like, if somebody else wants to get into strongman, where would they start? Where do they go to read about it? Where do they go to find about competitions? What's, step one?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually I don't think I answered it. I kind of how I got into it, but I remember finding my first competition like it was yesterday. I actually worked at a gym at the time. I was a junior in college and I was home for the summer. So I worked at a gym and we were hosting our own kind of like CrossFit competition. So I was making the Facebook event, and you know how the analytics when you're on the internet, if you search for something, all of a sudden all your ads start, whatever you search come up. So I must have put the word strong in, and then all of a sudden, it used my geographical location, and I found this gym, TPS, which I had heard of before, that was doing a strongman competition. So it was just on Facebook, and I clicked on the event, and I saw they had a novice competition, and then before I knew it, one of my absolute favorite things about this sport is I feel like there's such a community, which I'm sure you've heard about before, and I feel like everyone in the sport, is a great ambassador for talking about the community of strongman. But literally before I knew it, I just clicked I was going to this event. I had like 3 girls messaging me on Facebook saying like, oh my God, you've never done this before. Like, are you going to come train? Can I help you? Can I send you a video? So I would just say, if anyone wants to get started, just go on Facebook or go on Starting Strongman and find a gym that maybe has, even if it's just powerlifting that they have, because I bet somebody else will know a strongman or point you in the right direction. So just utilize, Facebook and social media. Or just start, it's popular enough now that if you just Google search like strongman competitions in my area code and, type in your zip code or wherever you are, I guarantee you can find something within 5 minutes.
That's awesome. I love that TPS, I feel like everybody in the fucking New England has like some TPS story, how like that gym has played a role in their training career one way or another.
Yeah. Played a huge role in my career, my life. So yeah, I mean, it was one of the first places to be doing everything that it does. So
yep. When I first moved to Rhode Island, every Saturday I would drive to TPS and I'd meet my sister there, and we'd go like deadlift down in the shed, and all the stones would be everywhere, and I'd get tacky all over my hands. I'd be like, "Fuck is this stuff?" Like I can never get this stuff off, but. Yeah, it's such a cool place.
I met Alex actually when I first graduated college, your sister. I just went up to her one day in the gym because I was like, oh, you're another girl that's deadlifting, like want to be friends basically. Yeah. And I think I met you one Saturday too because we talked the whole time like, oh, my brother's doing my programming. I think I actually met you one Saturday.
Yep.
It's funny, that was like 3 years ago now.
I remember you were front squatting more weight than I'd ever seen anybody front squat. That's my specific memory of meeting you.
I guess that's good then. I guess that's kind of known for front squats. So.
So on that topic of like females, like, empowering each other, I know that's big. That's a big thing for you personally. Like I know it's your mission kind of as a coach, as a lifter, to empower other females to get into strength sports. So sometimes I almost feel like I'm like blinded to the outside world because we spend so much time in it, and we train a lot of females, and it's like, it's just normal for us to think that like, females are into strength training, like it's a thing that they do. It's not a big deal. Like from the outside looking in, what do you think is like the state of heavy strength training for females in general, and where do you think it's going? When will it become completely acceptable for females everywhere to lift heavy?
That's a question I often ask myself every day. And like you said, we are in the strength world. We're consumed in it. We live it, breathe it, so we think that it's normal. But oftentimes, it was just a couple days ago, actually I was getting my nails done. I was actually removing, it was kind of funny because I get my nails done every once in a while, but I keep them short. I don't, do anything to them, but I have them remove my calluses for me because they were open. And the lady next to me, so as the person doing my nails is literally like using the tool to get my calluses off, the person next to me is like, what do you do? And I just started talking about lifting, and she was like, oh, it's that's when and I bite my tongue because I try not to get so mad, but the person was like, oh, well, you're not huge, like you're not what I would think. And then that's when I really tell them, like, I know that that's the preconceived notion, but believe it or not, unless you take an absurd amount of steroids, you're not going to look like a man, and it's much, much harder to build muscle than you think. People often tell me like, oh, well, I just want to look like you or something, and I'm like, all right, well, I've been lifting for like 12 years, so it's not going to happen overnight. So that's kind of funny. I hope that within the next 10 years or so, I think with things like some of the CrossFit women and other women on social media, it is becoming more acceptable for the younger generation. But I would say people that are like at the age of 30 and above, it's still kind of weird to them to see these females lifting. And not everyone, but quite a few.
That's a great point, and I think that's something I've had to come to grips with as like a gym owners now, is like weightlifting is for women is way more mainstream than it was before, but still like probably your biggest clientele as a gym owner might not be the people like in their 20s. It's going to be the people that are in their like 30s and 40s and make a living and actually have like the finances to be able to join a gym and get coaching and everything like that. And it's still like it's not as mainstream to that generation that was before us as we try to almost like think it is, because that mainstream weightlifting culture is a lot of younger people at this point still.
Yeah, we've even talked about like how we have to be a little bit careful sometimes with like our marketing language, that we don't like turn off too many people by using words like, call it like every time I write up something, I want to say like lifter to describe people who train here, but it's like, people see that and they're like, well, I'm not a lifter. I don't know if I belong here. Right. So just being careful about the way that you describe things, like, how do you go about making like strongman competition more accessible to females who maybe haven't tried it before?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think that kind of comes down, like, I hope, and I always try and teach this to people too, or every woman, it's like, if you can just teach one other person about the sport. Like, for example, I'll use, I have a client, she's awesome, her name's Tori Mills, and she came to me, she had saw some other woman at the gym doing it, and she came to me and was like, all right, well, I did bikini, like, I'm super girly, I like this, and I like that, and I'm like, well, you can still be girly and do this, and I told her, I'm like, well, now that she's kind of like in love with it now, she did one competition and emailed me and was like, I am so hooked, so I told her, I'm like, well, please, try and spread the word. I think that it's like anything that becomes popular, like CrossFit, has blown up over the last 15 years, and I was just saying to someone the other day, I honestly see strongman kind of taking over CrossFit in the next 5 years. And everyone knows what CrossFit is, but, back in early 2000, they didn't.
Yep.
So I'm hoping that that's what happens. It's just kind of getting the word out more and more, and everyone should take a responsibility in that.
CrossFit really has done such a tremendous service to the entire fitness industry. It's easy like to be in our position, whether you're a power lifter, strongman competitor, or whatever, to kind of like shit on CrossFit just because quality control is poor at times. But it's made high intensity, like hardcore fitness, whatever you want to call it, so much more accessible to tons and tons of people. So we need to tip our hats to CrossFit, in that sense.
But I guess kind of another point to add on to this. I remember when I first started strongman, my first Arnold in 2015, I was being interviewed and someone asked me like, what's your dream for this sport? And I said, well, I hope men can get their pro card. I hope that in the next few years women can. And then literally the next year that happened. So it's amazing, because I honestly wasn't sure if that was going to be something that I'd ever be able to obtain, getting a pro card. I wasn't sure if it would ever be an option for women. And then it came out of nowhere, and now, it's kind of funny how that works. So I'm hoping that, I hope I look back at this interview in 2 years and kind of laugh and say like, oh wow, I didn't think it was going to get that big for 5 years, and it did. So. Yeah.
Well, good people like you and us, we just need to keep pushing the good word of strength and getting people invested in it. Can you explain a little bit, and just in case people don't know, like, what does it mean to have your pro card in strongman?
Absolutely. So when you get your pro card, there's a few different ways to get it. It's usually from winning a huge competition, so something like the Arnold. You have to go through a few different steps to get there. So number one, it starts with, winning a local show that's sanctioned so that you can get to the national level. At the national level, you'll be against all the other people that, were top 1 or 2 or 3 in their respective weight classes in their shows. So it's kind of like at nationals, you're with the best of the best. And then you take it one step further when you go to, a world show. Then you're with all the best of the best. And then the best of the best are together and they're separated. So once you have your pro card, it's awesome though, because then you can, you're competing with people that are equivalent to you. So it's like, you never know, like people have their favorites, but I used to joke, like I told my own coach, Eric Dawson, I was like, well, I don't really know if I need to train that event because I know I'm fast. And he was like, well, Brittany, like at your level, you're pro now, like everyone's fast. Yeah. So, and I was like, yeah, you're right. Like everyone is fast now. So it's great just because, like I have World's Strongest Women coming up in like 17 days now. And it's like, I would say we're all like, you can't put money on who's going to win because we're all just so competitive.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And it was really cool to see you compete at the Arnold Classic. So the Arnold Classic, for the listeners who don't know, is like one of the biggest fitness expos ever, named after Arnold Schwarzenegger. You got, that's like the second biggest bodybuilding competition in the world next to Mr. Olympia. You got all kinds of powerlifting, strongman, all kinds of physique stuff. To go as a spectator, which I've done a few times, is quite an experience. You get to see so much cool stuff. My sister competed last year in powerlifting. That was fun to go and do that. But your claim to fame outside of getting to compete, at the Arnold Classic is a certain very famous bodybuilder, former bodybuilder whose name is on the expo, took a selfie with you. And that went viral when that happened. So what are you thinking when you're in there competing at the Arnold Classic and Arnold Schwarzenegger takes his phone and just takes a selfie with you mid competition?
Yeah, that was definitely a very, very cool moment that I'll never forget. March 3rd, 2015. And it was funny because, so as any competitor is, right before the gun or they say go goes off, I am so focused that I can't see or hear anything but the listening for either the whistle or the gunshot or whatever, and I'm focused on the 30 feet in front of me. So that the person who was giving the command said I was holding on to a frame, 500-pound frame, ready to go. Like I was in my stance. Person said athlete ready, set. And usually, the whistle will go off within 2 seconds, and it wasn't going off, but I didn't want to avert my eye. And then probably about 20 seconds have gone by, and I'm like, is the whistle broken? What's going on? I was actually getting really mad, and I could see in my peripheral that someone was trying to take a selfie with me. And I honestly got really upset because I'm like, why are they just letting someone come on the floor? Like, these athletes, we need to go. And finally, after, it took me about 2 minutes till I would look over because I didn't want to lose my focus. And then I looked over, and my jaw probably dropped. And I was just so upset. And I went over and touched him, and then the bodyguard pushed me off because I got chalk all over Arnold. And they were like, get away. But I was like, all right, I took a picture. So yeah, that was really, really great moment.
Yeah.
Arnold, there was a lot more involved in that than any of us knew. Yeah.
Yeah. Arnold's got no feel. He is
zero feel.
Yeah. He's got you out of the zone.
That would be if you were about to unrack your squat in a powerlifting competition and someone tried to take a selfie with you, I'd probably bite them. I'd be what the?
I guess his name's on the expo. He can do what he wants, I guess.
Yeah. Sometimes I see videos of him taking pictures with different competitors. There's one with Eddie Hall, and he does have no feel, or I don't know, but yeah, he just weasels his way in there. It's his competition.
Yeah, he's so friendly, and I think it's awesome. I was watching a documentary recently. Eddie Hall was in it, and they were talking about how Arnold just, he wished them all luck. I feel like he really does love the strength sports. He was in bodybuilding, but he loved watching the strongman. So that's pretty cool that he supports it so much.
Yeah, you can see it on his face. Like when people lift like massive weights, that how happy he is. Like that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I think back in the day, like when he first started competing in bodybuilding, I think there was a strength component to bodybuilding. I think it was like both physique and like strength based, because there's that like that iconic picture of Arnold like deadlifting a massive amount of weight. I don't know exactly how much it is, but I feel like that was a component. So obviously we all know lifting heavy does great things for your physique, but sometimes that gets lost in the shuffle at this point.
Cool.
All right, Brittany, I know that you're getting ready to train tonight. We appreciate you taking so much time to talk to us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the competition you have coming up, and then where people can find more about what you're doing?
Absolutely. So I have World's Strongest Woman coming up, and that's December 16th and 17th. It's by Card and Strongman, and how the guy Lynn Morehouse set it up is amazing, because a lot of people, there's a set way to get to like the Arnold, but unfortunately things come up. Maybe you have to go to a wedding or something. You can't always get to these top level competitions. So what this guy did, I thought was pretty genius. So there's 30 women in each weight class, and he invited 10 that he thought deserved to be in. I was one of the 10, which I was so excited. I was like, wow. I'm considered one of the strongest in the world. So I did that, and there was also 20 spots that you were able to submit a video to earn your invite to. So I think that's awesome, because, it's opening the doors to so many women in other countries that maybe couldn't come over here for the Arnold to compete, but they're definitely very strong. So, I can say without a doubt that this competition is the biggest one I've ever done, and there's not one woman or one middleweight that I don't think everyone, when I think of strong women that I'm competitive with, there's not one person missing from the list. So it's definitely going to be one hell of a show. And I keep saying this too. It's like I did the Olympia in September, and it's like every show I do, like this is the biggest one, but it's just crazy how it just keeps rising. So if someone wants to get into strongman, like I was saying earlier, you can probably just Google something, Facebook. I have no problem. Like I try and treat my social media like a job, where I check my DMs at night, definitely on Sunday afternoon, with a lot of people just asking questions, so I try and answer them like emails and try and point them in the right direction.
Okay, awesome. And where can people find more about you on social media?
Okay, so my Instagram is B_Dimes. That's pretty much, I try and post a lot of stories about what I'm doing. I even try and share, live feeds of meta competition, talking about their competitors and showing some footage there, so.
B Dimes with a Z.
B Dimes, yeah.
B Dimes.
Awesome.
I just feel like it's better if you say it that way.
B Dimes. We can be your hype man if you want. Just let us know.
Perfect. Yeah, you want to come see me in North Carolina?
North Carolina has
I've
great
always
beer.
wanted to go to North Carolina.
I'm sure they have a good beer selection.
They do. They have really good beer selection.
So Greg Knuckles told us.
Yeah. There's a couple famous breweries there. So awesome. Is that competition going to be streamed online at all anywhere?
So I think they'll do live on Facebook, but they're giving away to some of the men. They're giving away like a world's qualifier for them to get on the TV, World's Strongest Man, the Giant Flag it's called. So I think they have to be careful how much they can show, just because of sponsors and things like that. So it's not going to be on Flow Elite like it usually is, but I'm sure people will be posting. I mean, I know I will be at night posting, and I'm sure all the other competitors will. So if you just probably search the hashtag World's Strongest Woman or World's Strongest Man, you should be able to find it.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right. Well, we'll be sure to follow along, and so should everyone listening. Any last questions for Brittany?
I don't think so. Best of luck at your competition. Yeah. Have a good training session tonight. Thanks again for taking the time to chat with us.
Yes.
Thank you both so much. Talk to you soon. I'm going to actually come up there soon. I always train to the gym, so I'll come up there.
Yeah, you're always welcome. Train. Maybe we'll see you at Top Strength.
Yeah, right after my competition, we can hit some front squats together.
Yeah. Maybe we hang out at Top Strength. We see Steve, and still going to send it.
Still going to send it.
No, we're actually, Steve and I are doing a seminar together January 27th for anyone in the area that wants to try strongman for the first time. So.
Holy
nice.
shit.
Cool. Yeah, January 27th, come down.
Wow.
27th.
Is that in Rhode Island?
Yeah, right at Top Strength.
All right, January 27th.
Yeah.
Might send it.
I might pick up an Atlas stone for the first time. All right.
I don't do Atlas.
Right,
Atlas stones hurt my fingers.
All right. See you, Brittany.